I'm interested in how the digital divide is actually getting smaller in these rural towns where they are actually via satellite to their PC getting webcast that way, and that's their preference. Mr. Lee had a comment?
Thank you, Congressman. I do. I want to make sure everybody understands that 95% of the money that comes in will be from the large broadcasters, webcasters. We're talking about a very specific group of folks who have a significant problem with the rates that the larger webcasters would have to pay. We have been talking with them. Sound Exchange has been talking with them. In fact, I believe the $500 that was referenced by Mr. Miller, which he quite rightly has observed would cost millions of dollars, I believe that we have offered to, not we, but Sound Exchange has offered to put a $2,500 cap on that. So we applaud every one of the smaller webcasters that want to play the niche music, want to play the independent artist music. 70% of the music we understand is crossover, but we want our independent artists to be able to be heard, and we want the very small communities that you're talking about, sir, to have access to those. We negotiate with National Public Radio. We negotiate with the record industry. I believe that a process is in place that will allow the recognition of the specific problems of the small webcasters to be resolved. And I do agree with Mr. Shabbat that this is not the place for that resolution to take place for the very reason the good congressman stated.
Anybody else want to comment?
I want lots of stuff to be free, but it isn't. If I want to go to New York, I either have to pay gas and tolls, or I have to pay a train, or I have to pay for an airline. And I can't call them up and say, I don't really feel like paying for it. Why don't you just give it to me? As a small business with 3 people in my business, I am leading towards a day when my health insurance for 2 people is going to be larger than my mortgage. And I'm a small business. I'm working 18-hour days, and every income stream is meaningful to me. And I'm willing to fight hard to try and make sure that some of the younger musicians who don't really see that down the line they're going to be paying these expenses or living without health insurance and lots of other great benefits get the income streams that they deserve. Because if we don't give it to them now, it's not like we're going to negotiate up from somewhere. And I think it's really important to educate people about the many different, be they small, income streams. For me, paying $1,200 a month on health insurance for 2 people, it's significant to me when I get a check from an income stream from internet radio.
Mr. Miller?
But I would like to clarify, we're not talking about free. We're not asking for anything for free. In fact, we think that all artists should be compensated for their work. That only makes sense. And I'd also like to clarify, we're a small business as well. We have rent, we have expenses, we're 4 people strong. A lot of small independent webcasters are 1 person. And even, it can be misleading, but even some apparently larger webcasters, for example, AOL Radio, has a staff of approximately 4 people. So even though they're part of that larger entity, if you were to strip away the rest of AOL and said, AOL Radio, you stand on your own, it would never happen. And I would actually argue that when we talk about large webcasters, if you stripped away the larger business from the webcasting piece of that business, it would never stand on its own. And we're a perfect example of that. We were tied to an FM radio station for several years, and then when we went internet only, we went out of business twice trying to make it work. And you could argue that for other non-commercial webcasters as well as large companies. So they are tied to larger companies, but I think we're looking at building a healthy industry and an internet radio that can stand on its own.
Very good. My time's running low, but I just want to thank everybody for being here today. This is an incredible group of people we have assembled here today, and I'll yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Clarke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Shabbat. We're holding a hearing on a very critical issue that affects so many people, particularly with this evolving and emerging industry. I'm just sitting here and I'm saying, we're really at the at the advent of a 21st century issue that's going to continue to be an issue. And so the concern here is, where's the categorical compromise? I sit here and I listen to compelling testimony from public radio, which has a totally different mandate, and I'm not hearing anything except from public radio that carves that out. Listening to artists who are saying, I have a business here, I need help, but I'm not hearing where the win-win is. And certainly, Mr. Miller, what's happening with your company and companies like yours, Mr. Silverman, each of you have a very unique component to what has become our world of music, essentially. And we're trying to find a catch-all for that. It does not exist. And if we can start from that premise, then perhaps coming to the table with categorical solutions will be the way that we actually get to the solution. Has anyone there thought about what their particular component to the solution must be for the survival of your businesses and the interests of your particular businesses? And I'd like to hear from folks at the table about that.
Well, I honestly think that what would be fair would just be a flat rate based on revenue, and that way it would be fair for everyone, because XM and Sirius are locked in at a 7.5% rate of their revenue. So why are you going to go after internet radio and try to make them pay more than satellite radio? It's that is the issue. It is not fair across the board.
Right, and of course, traditional broadcast, terrestrial radio and television, it doesn't exist at all, which
Right.
are the highest revenue-generating components for music in general. So it does seem, it seems very lopsided as far as the way that the revenues are. I would agree, and I think Mr. Silverman presented a good idea which would be maybe a combination of revenues with listenership and size of a company. So if a company or a small webcaster, say a single man operation, one day all of a sudden finds there's 14 million listeners on his on his podcast or whatever that morning, that all of a sudden he owes an exorbitant amount of money with very, very little revenue coming in, there would be contingency plans placed in line with that to address that as well, because you could essentially have a webcaster go from 5 people listening to 1 million theoretically overnight, and the idea of a per stream could literally bankrupt someone just like that. And we all know, I think SaveNet Radio had 14 million hits 3 days ago. The day before they had 350,000. So use those sort of numbers as how quickly something can change in viewership or listenership. That does need to be addressed, and I think all of us here, want to see artists be paid, and we'd love to grow the royalty rates as far as the overall stream of things without constricting the webcasters to a point where it becomes fewer and fewer players as opposed to more and more players. And I mean the long tail theory of content, is becoming progressively more the case, where people want more and more and more variety, and the internet is going to allow that, whereas it seems from our position that this would kind of bring us back 10 years, which I think is not going to help us at all. We need to be forward-thinking, and a combination of considering revenue, listenership, would be a much, much better way, with some sort of contingency plans as far as listenership to address, as opposed to a flat per stream cost.
Ms. Fink, did you have any thinking around this?